What is a person's worth? Is it measured in the years of devotion they give, the dreams they sacrifice for Amelia Rosewood? After 12 years of marriage to real estate tycoon Mark Sterling, her worth was calculated down to the cent. In a cold, merciless courtroom, the man she had built a life with, the man for whom she'd given up everything, handed her a final cruel settlement. It wasn't a check. It wasn't a bank transfer. It was a single crisp $10 bill. $10 for 12 years of her life. This is the story of how that single insulting bill became the foundation for an empire, and how the woman left with nothing rose to become the queen of a world her ex-husband could only dream of entering. The air in the Superior Court of California County of Los Angeles was stale with the scent of old paper and bitter endings. Amelia Rosewood sat perfectly still, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were bone white. She felt 1,000 eyes on her, but the only ones that mattered were across the room. Mark Sterling, her husband of 12 years, soon to be her ex-husband, was whispering to his lawyer, a shark in a Tom Ford suit named Richard Davenport. A small, cruel smirk played on Mark's lips. Amelia had once thought that smirk was charming, a sign of his confidence. Now she knew it for what it was, the glint of a predator who enjoyed the kill. All assets having been acquired under the name of the Sterling Corporation are deemed the sole property of Mr. Mark Sterling. The judge droned on his voice, a monotonous final nail in the coffin of her life. The prenuptial agreement she'd signed at 22, starry-eyed and desperately in love, was an iron cage. She hadn't even read the fine print. Mark had told her it was a formality, a piece of paper for his investors. "We're forever Amy," he had said, stroking her hair. "This means nothing to us." It meant everything now. It meant she was entitled to nothing. The Brentwood mansion she had turned into a home, the art she had so carefully selected, the life she had painstakingly curated to support his meteoric rise in the cutthroat world of L.A. real estate, all of it was his. In lieu of alimony, and as a final gesture of settlement, the judge continued reading from a stipulation Mark's lawyer had just submitted. Mr. Sterling will provide a one-time cash payment to Ms. Rosewood. A sliver of hope, pathetic and desperate, pierced through Amelia's numbness. Maybe he had a heart after all. Maybe a small sum to help her get back on her feet. Enough for a deposit on a small apartment, maybe a used car. Mark stood up. He buttoned his bespoke suit jacket, adjusted his Patek Philippe watch, and strode towards her. He moved with the easy arrogance of a man who had never known a day of struggle, a man who owned every room he entered. He stopped directly in front of her. The cameras of the tabloid press stationed outside, but with long lenses aimed through the courtroom doors, flashed. He reached into the pocket of his trousers and pulled out his wallet. It was alligator skin, impossibly sleek. He opened it, and with a theatrical slowness, he extracted a single bill. It was $10. He held it between his thumb and forefinger and let it float down onto the polished table in front of her. The green bill with Alexander Hamilton's face staring up seemed to mock her. For a taxi, Mark said, his voice low enough that only she and their lawyers could hear, but loud enough to carry the venom. "And a coffee. That's about what your contribution was worth." The world went silent. The droning of the judge, the shuffling of papers, the frantic scribbling of reporters. It all faded into a roaring in Amelia's ears. Her contribution: she had hosted endless dinners for his investors, charming them with her knowledge of art and literature. She had managed their homes, his schedule, his life, so he could focus solely on building his empire. She had been his partner in everything but name. She had given up her own aspirations of becoming a museum curator to be the perfect corporate wife, and her worth was $10. Her lawyer, a kind but overwhelmed public defender named Sarah, placed a hand on her arm. "Amelia, don't. Just breathe." But Amelia couldn't breathe. She looked from the $10 bill to Mark's face. There was no remorse, no flicker of the man she had once loved. There was only cold, triumphant contempt. He had not only defeated her, he had humiliated her. He wanted to break her so completely that she would never recover. The gavel struck. It was over. Mark turned and walked away without a backward glance, swallowed by his entourage. Amelia was left sitting at the table, the $10 bill lying there like a dead leaf. She felt her entire body trembling, a deep seismic shudder that came from the very core of her soul. She had to get out. She stood on unsteady legs, picked up the bill, and folded it carefully, her fingers numb. She walked out of the courtroom, past the pitying glances and the whispering reporters, and into the harsh California sunlight. The city felt alien, a concrete jungle, where she was now the weakest prey. She had no home, no money in the bank. Mark had frozen their joint accounts months ago, and no prospects. All she had was the clothes on her back, a small box of personal items the court allowed her, and $10. She walked for blocks, not knowing where she was going. Her designer heels, a gift from Mark in a happier time, pinched her feet. Finally, she found a small, grimy bus stop bench and sank onto it. She unfolded the bill. $10. A taxi and a coffee. Tears she had refused to shed in the courtroom now streamed down her face. They weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of pure, unadulterated rage. He thought this would be the end of her. He thought this bill was a gravestone for her life. Clutching the money in her fist, she made a silent, ferocious vow. This would not be her end. This would be her beginning. This $10 would not be a symbol of her worthlessness. It would be the seed. He had left her with just $10. She would make him regret it for the rest of his life. The first 24 hours were a blur of shame and survival. Amelia swallowed her pride and called the only person she thought might help her old college friend Clara, a woman she hadn't spoken to in years, pushed away by the isolating vortex of Mark's world. Clara didn't hesitate. She drove her beat-up Honda Civic to the address Amelia gave her and found her huddled in a 24-hour donut shop, nursing a cold cup of coffee she had bought with $1 from her $10 insult. Clara's tiny rent-controlled apartment in Koreatown was a world away from the sterile, glass-walled opulence of the Brentwood mansion. It was filled with books, mismatched furniture, and the smell of jasmine tea. It was warm. It was real. For the first time in a decade, Amelia felt like she could breathe. He did what Clara asked, her voice a mixture of horror and fury after Amelia recounted the courtroom finale. Amelia just knotted her throat too tight to speak. She opened her palm and showed Clara the folded $10 bill. She hadn't spent the rest of it. She couldn't. That man Clara seethed as a monster, a soulless walking void in a $1,000 suit. For a week, Amelia slept on Clara's sofa, existing in a fog. The humiliation was a physical weight pressing down on her chest. She saw the tabloid headlines online. Sterling's ex left penniless, complete with a photo of her desolate face outside the courthouse. Mark's PR team was already spinning the narrative, painting her as a disgruntled gold digger who got what she deserved. One morning, Amelia woke up to the sound of Clara getting ready for her job as an assistant librarian. The weight was still there, but something had shifted. The rage she felt on the bus bench had cooled into something harder, more focused. It was resolve. She unfolded the $10 bill and placed it on the coffee table. She had $900 left. She couldn't frame it or save it. That would be treating it like a monument to her defeat. No, she had to use it as a tool. As the first brick. "I'm going to use it," Amelia said, her voice raspy from disuse. Clara paused, holding her travel mug. "Use what?" "The money. I'm going to use it to start over." That day she took the remaining $9 and bought a stack of newspapers and a week-long bus pass. She spent hours in Clara's apartment circling want ads with a red pen. Her art history degree and her experience managing the Sterling household didn't translate well to a standard resume. She was overqualified for retail, underqualified for corporate. Then she saw it. A small, unassuming ad in the art section, gallery assistant needed, part-time. Duties include inventory cleaning and minor restoration work. Must have a keen eye and steady hand. Apply in person. The Serafina Gallery downtown. Minor restoration work. Her heart gave a painful lurch. Before Mark, her dream had been to work at the Getty restoring Renaissance masterpieces. She had a natural talent for it, a patience and precision that felt like a form of meditation. Mark had called it a cute hobby. It was a long shot, but it was the only ad that felt like her. She put on the one simple professional dress she owned, a relic from her pre-Mark life that Clara had helped her retrieve from a storage unit. It was worlds away from the designer labels she was used to, but in it, she felt more like herself than she had in years. The Serafina Gallery was a small, hidden gem tucked away on a quiet street far from the glitzy galleries of Beverly Hills. It was run by a stern, elderly woman named Eleanor Vance, whose sharp eyes seemed to see right through Amelia's carefully constructed composure. "Your resume is sparse," Eleanor said, peering over her spectacles. 12 years as a household manager. I managed budget staff event planning for hundreds of guests and the acquisition and curation of a multi-million-dollar private art collection. Amelia said, her voice steady. She didn't mention the collection was Mark's. Eleanor raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Curation? Yes. I have a degree in art history from Stanford with a focus on 16th century Italian art. The older woman was silent for a long moment. She then pointed to a small oil painting in the corner, its varnish yellowed and cracked. What do you see? Amelia walked over to it. It was a pastoral scene, unremarkable at first glance, but she looked closer, her old training kicking in. She noticed the subtle brushwork in the clouds, the specific way the light hit the trees. It's a student piece, Amelia said. Someone trying to emulate the style of Corot. But see here, she pointed to a tiny, almost invisible detail on the frame's backing. The canvas is older than the painting. And this pigment, the lapis lazuli in the sky, it's too pure for a student work. I think there's another painting underneath. Eleanor Vance stared at her, her stern expression melting into one of grudging respect. You're the first person in 20 years to notice that. The job is yours. It pays next to nothing. The hours are terrible. You start Monday. Amelia felt a surge of triumph so powerful it almost brought her to her knees. She had done it. She had gotten a job on her own merit. The work was grueling. She swept floors, answered phones, and packed artwork for shipping. But for a few hours each week, Eleanor would allow her into the small back room, the restoration studio. There, surrounded by the smell of turpentine and linseed oil, Amelia felt a sense of peace she hadn't known was possible. With a delicate touch, she would clean a centuries-old canvas, repair a chipped frame, or carefully in-paint a tiny loss. She was taking things that were broken, faded, and forgotten, and she was making them whole again. She was restoring herself. Months passed. Amelia moved into a tiny studio apartment she could barely afford. She ate ramen noodles and rode the bus. She was poor, anonymous, and invisible, and she had never felt more powerful. One evening she was working late, completely absorbed in the delicate process of removing the overpainting from the pastoral scene. With a cotton swab and a special solvent, she was slowly, millimeter by millimeter, revealing the painting underneath. A portrait of a woman with sad, knowing eyes was beginning to emerge. She was so focused she didn't hear the gallery's front bell jingle. Eleanor. Are you still here? A man's voice called out, rich and resonant. Amelia jumped, startled. She walked out from the back room, wiping her hands on a rag. Standing in the middle of the gallery was a man who exuded an aura of quiet authority. He was tall, in his late 50s, with silvering hair at his temples and eyes the color of a stormy sea. He was impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray suit, but he wore it with a relaxed comfort that Mark never had. I'm sorry Ms. Vance has gone home for the day, Amelia said. Can I help you? The man's gaze fell on the painting in her hands, then on her face smudged with pigment. He smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes. I don't think so, he said, his eyes twinkling. But I am fascinated. My mother would never let anyone touch that painting. She always said it was a puzzle waiting for the right person to solve it. My name is Julian Vance. Eleanor is my mother. Amelia's heart skipped a beat. She had just been found covered in grime and smelling of chemicals by the son of her formidable boss. I'm Amelia Rosewood, she stammered. I'm the new assistant. Julian Vance looked at her. truly looked at her with an intensity that was unnerving but not predatory. It was curiosity. "Amelia Rosewood," he repeated softly as if testing the name. "It's a pleasure to meet you. Tell me about the woman you're uncovering." And so under the dim lights of the closed gallery, Amelia began to talk about art. She talked about the lost art of portraiture, about the hidden stories in a single brushstroke. And for the first time, a man of power and influence wasn't listening to her as a beautiful accessory. He was listening to her as an expert. A new brick had just been laid in the foundation of her new life. Julian Vance became a regular, if infrequent, visitor to the gallery in the evenings. His visits were always under the guise of checking on his mother, but he invariably found his way to the small restoration room where Amelia worked. Their conversations were a slow, careful dance of discovery. He never asked about her past, and she never offered. He seemed to understand that she was a woman in the process of rebuilding, and he respected the scaffolding she had erected around her heart. He was the founder and CEO of the Vance Corporation, a global leader in luxury boutique hotels. His philosophy was unique. Each hotel was designed to be a living art gallery, a complete immersion in the culture and aesthetics of its location. He spoke of architecture and design with the same passion Amelia spoke of art restoration. He saw the world not as a series of transactions like Mark had, but as a canvas of possibilities. "The problem with modern luxury," he said one evening, gesturing with his hands as he leaned against a workbench, "is that it has no soul. It's sterile. Polished marble, generic, abstract art chrome fixtures. It's a beautifully designed waiting room. A hotel should tell a story. It should have a heartbeat." Amelia, carefully applying a tiny dab of paint to a 19th century landscape, found herself captivated. "And the art is the soul." "Exactly," he said, his eyes lighting up. "It provides the narrative, the history, the emotion, finding the right pieces. That's the hardest part. It requires more than just a fat checkbook. It requires a curator's eye, a historian's knowledge." He paused, his gaze fixed on her. "It requires someone like you." Amelia's hand stilled. She looked up at him, her heart pounding. "I'm a gallery assistant, Mr. Vance. Please call me Julian." "And I disagree," he said gently. "I've seen your work. I've heard you talk. You don't just see paintings. You see the lives behind them. You have a gift, Amelia." A few weeks later, Julian made her an offer that left her breathless. He was in the final stages of acquiring a historic building in San Francisco, a magnificent but derelict Art Deco landmark called the Argent Hotel. He planned to restore it to its former glory and make it the crown jewel of his hotel empire. "I don't want a typical art consultant who will just buy expensive pieces from a catalog," he explained over coffee at a small cafe near the gallery. "I want someone to curate the entire experience, to find art that speaks to the building's history, to the soul of San Francisco. I want you to head the project." Amelia was stunned into silence. Her in charge of a multi-million-dollar art acquisition project. It was absurd. It was the dream she had abandoned 12 years ago, handed to her on a silver platter. "Julian, I don't have the experience," she stammered. "I haven't worked in this field professionally in over a decade." "You have the talent," he said firmly. "That's more important than any line on a resume." "I trust my instincts, Amelia, and they tell me you are the only person for this job." He named a salary that was more than she had earned in a year at the gallery. It wasn't just a job. It was a lifeline. It was a declaration of faith in her abilities. Tears welled in her eyes. It was the first time since the divorce that someone had seen her for her potential, not for her past. "Yes," she whispered, "I'll do it." Her new office at the Vance Corporation headquarters in Century City was a stark contrast to the cramped restoration room. It was on the 40th floor with a panoramic view of the city she had once felt so lost in. The role was demanding, pushing her in ways she hadn't been pushed in years. She spent her days in archives, her evenings in little-known galleries, and her weekends at estate sales hunting for hidden treasures. She wasn't just buying art. She was weaving a tapestry of stories that would bring the Argent Hotel to life. Julian was a constant source of support, but he was not a micromanager. He gave her autonomy, trusting her vision completely. Their professional relationship deepened. They would have late-night dinners after long workdays, their conversations flowing easily from 20th century architecture to obscure poets to their shared love for old films. There was a spark between them, an undeniable chemistry, but it remained an unspoken undercurrent to their professional respect. Amelia was still healing, and Julian, a widower for 5 years, seemed to understand that. One afternoon she was presenting her preliminary acquisitions plan to the executive board. She was nervous facing a room full of seasoned business people, but as she began to speak, her passion took over. She spoke of sourcing art from local Bay Area artists, of finding period pieces that echoed the hotel's Jazz Age origins, of commissioning a central sculpture that would pay homage to the Golden Gate Bridge. She was in her element, confident and articulate. She felt a thrill of purpose that was entirely her own. As she finished, the room broke into applause. Julian caught her eye from across the polished mahogany table and gave her a small, proud nod. In that moment, Amelia felt a profound sense of arrival. She was no longer Mark Sterling's ex-wife. She was Amelia Rosewood, Director of Arts and Curation for the Vance Corporation. But just as she was beginning to feel secure, the past came roaring back. Julian called her into his office. His expression was grim. "We have a problem with the Argent acquisition," he said, his voice tight. "There's a competing bid, an aggressive hostile offer from a rival development firm. They're trying to poach the deal from under us." "Who is it?" Amelia asked, her stomach clenching with a sudden icy premonition. Julian slid a folder across his desk. "A company that's been making a name for itself with ruthless tactics. They're called the Sterling Corporation." Amelia's blood ran cold. She opened the folder, and there it was, Mark's face smiling confidently from the cover of a business magazine. The headline read, "Mark Sterling, the man who can't be beaten." He was coming for her new life. He wasn't just after the hotel, he was after her. He had seen her name in the initial project filings and couldn't stand the thought of her success. He wanted to crush her, to take this new world away from her, just as he had taken the old one. The boardroom, which had felt like a symbol of her triumph, now felt like a battleground. And she was standing on the front line, facing the monster she thought she had escaped. The news that Mark Sterling was their competitor hit Amelia like a physical blow. For a few days, the old fear returned. She found herself checking over her shoulder on the street, her sleep plagued by nightmares of the courtroom, of his cold, dismissive smirk. He had an almost mythical ability to get what he wanted, to dismantle his opponents with a combination of charm, wealth, and sheer ruthlessness. She considered resigning. It would be the easy way out. She could disappear back into the quiet anonymity of the gallery, leaving Julian to fight his own battle. But then she would look at the $10 bill, which she now kept pressed between the pages of a book on her nightstand. It was a reminder not of her humiliation, but of her vow. Running away was not an option. This wasn't just Julian's project anymore. It was hers. Mark was trying to tear down the first thing she had built for herself, and she would not let him. She walked into Julian's office, her jaw set with determination. "He's not going to win," she said, her voice devoid of its earlier tremor. "I know how he operates. I know his playbook." Julian looked at her, his expression a mixture of concern and admiration. "Amelia, you don't have to do this. I can handle Sterling. I don't want to put you in a position where you have to face him." "You're not putting me in this position, Julian." "He is," she countered. "For 12 years I watched him destroy people in business. He finds a weakness, and he exploits it relentlessly. He uses personal information, financial pressure, media manipulation. But his greatest weakness is his ego. He needs to be the smartest, most powerful man in the room. He underestimates anyone he considers beneath him. And right now, that's his biggest mistake. He's underestimating me." A new fire lit in Julian's eyes. He saw not a victim, but a warrior. "All right," he said. "Tell me everything you know." The next few weeks were a blur of intense preparation. Amelia became an invaluable part of the Vance Corporation's strategy team. She provided insights into Mark's tactics that no amount of corporate espionage could have uncovered. She knew he would try to wine and dine the Sellers, the Harrison family, a old-money San Francisco dynasty that valued legacy over quick profit. She knew he would present a slick, high-tech vision for the hotel promising maximum profitability, but stripping the building of its historic soul. The Harrisons care about their family's name, Amelia explained to Julian and his team. Mark will offer them more money, but he'll frame it as a modern upgrade. We need to frame our offer as an act of preservation, an homage. We're not buying a building, we're becoming the custodians of their legacy. Her strategy was brilliant. The Vance team shifted its focus from financial projections to a detailed, passionate presentation on historical restoration, community engagement, and artistic integrity. Amelia herself curated a portfolio showcasing how the hotel's original Art Deco features would be a centerpiece complemented by period-specific art she had already sourced. The day of the final presentation to the Harrison family arrived. The meeting was to be held in a neutral location, a law firm in San Francisco. As Amelia and Julian walked into the boardroom, she saw him. Mark was already there holding court, laughing with his lawyers. He looked the same, impeccably dressed, tanned, radiating an aura of untouchable success. He hadn't seen her yet. He was schmoozing with Mr. Harrison, the elderly patriarch of the family. Then his eyes scanned the room and landed on her. For a split second, his smile faltered. His expression was one of pure shock, followed by a flicker of something she recognized all too well. Fury. He had expected her to be a footnote in the Vance Corporation's paperwork, a token hire. He had not expected her to be standing here in the heart of the battle, looking poised and professional and equal. He recovered quickly, his charming mask slipping back into place. He walked towards them, extending a hand to Julian. Julian Vance. An honor. I'm Mark Sterling, he said, his voice smooth as silk. He then turned to Amelia, his eyes glinting with malice. And Amelia, what a surprise to see you here. I didn't realize the Vance Corporation was in the business of charity cases. The insult was designed to throw her off balance, to reduce her to the broken woman from the courtroom. The old Amelia would have flushed with shame. The new Amelia met his gaze without flinching. Hello, Mark, she said, her voice calm and cool. It's a pleasure to see you're still in business. Julian, this is my ex-husband, Mark Sterling. The casual, almost dismissive way she said ex-husband clearly rattled him. Julian, sensing the tension, stepped forward slightly, a subtle gesture of protection. Mr. Sterling, my director of arts and curation, Ms. Rosewood, has been the visionary behind our proposal for the Argent. Her expertise is invaluable. Mark's jaw tightened. Julian had not only defended her, but had elevated her, calling her a visionary. The presentations began. Mark's team went first. It was exactly as Amelia had predicted, a glossy, high-tech presentation full of buzzwords like synergy optimization and disruption. He proposed gutting most of the interior to create a sterile, minimalist space that could have been anywhere in the world. He promised the Harrisons an astronomical return on investment. Then it was their turn. Julian opened, speaking about his company's philosophy. Then he turned the floor over to Amelia. She stood before the Harrison family, not as a woman scorned, but as a passionate expert. She didn't use charts or graphs. She told a story. She spoke of the hotel's architect, of the parties held in its ballroom in the 1930s, of the history etched into its marble floors. She unveiled her art plan, showing them sketches and samples, explaining how each piece would honor the hotel's past while celebrating the vibrant future of the city. She spoke with an authority and a grace that captivated the room. She was no longer hiding behind Mark's shadow. She was casting her own. As she concluded, she looked directly at Mr. Harrison. Mr. Sterling is offering you a building, she said, her voice ringing with conviction. The Vance Corporation is offering to preserve a landmark. We are offering you a legacy. She saw a flicker of understanding, of deep respect in the old man's eyes. Mark was seething. He had been completely outmaneuvered, not by a rival CEO, but by the woman he had discarded as worthless. As the meeting concluded, Mark cornered her by the elevators. "What is this, Amelia?" He hissed, his voice a venomous whisper. "Some pathetic little revenge plot? You think this new boyfriend of yours is going to save you?" "This has nothing to do with you, Mark," she said, looking him dead in the eye. "This is my job, a concept I know you find difficult to associate with me. You're nothing without a man to pay your bills," he sneered. "You were nothing when I met you, and you're nothing now." That $10 bill was generous. A slow, cold smile touched Amelia's lips. "We'll see," she said as the elevator doors opened. "We'll see who wins in the end." As she stepped into the elevator with Julian leaving Mark standing alone in the hallway, she knew the war was far from over. He had been publicly challenged, and his ego would demand retribution. He wouldn't just try to win the deal anymore. He would try to destroy her. Mark Sterling was not a man who accepted defeat gracefully. Being outshone by Amelia in the boardroom was a narcissistic injury of the highest order, and he retaliated with the viciousness of a wounded predator. The battle for the Argent Hotel moved from the polished tables of the boardroom to the muddy trenches of the public eye. Within a week, the tabloids and gossip sites, always hungry for a scandal involving the rich and powerful, were alight with stories. Anonymous sources close to Mark Sterling began leaking carefully crafted narratives. The headlines were brutal. "Bitter ex-wife uses new billionaire lover to sabotage former husband's business deal." They painted Amelia as a vindictive gold digger using her relationship with Julian Vance to wage a personal vendetta. They twisted her role at the Vance Corporation, portraying her as an unqualified dilettante, given a vanity title to spite Mark. Amelia felt the familiar sting of public humiliation, but this time it was different. She wasn't alone. Julian and the entire Vance Corporation stood by her. Their PR department issued a firm, concise statement. "Ms. Rosewood is a highly valued executive at the Vance Corporation, hired for her exceptional talent and vision. We do not comment on baseless personal attacks." Julian was furious on her behalf. "He's a cornered animal, Amelia. This is what they do when they're desperate," he said, his hand covering hers on his office desk. "We'll fight it." "No." Amelia said, a surprising calm settling over her. "We won't. Fighting it gives it oxygen. Mark wants a public spectacle. He wants to drag me into the mud because that's where he lives. We are going to win by being better, by focusing on the prize." But Mark's attacks escalated. His team began digging into the Vance Corporation's finances, looking for any hint of weakness. They launched a whisper campaign among San Francisco's city planners and historical societies, suggesting that Julian Vance was a corporate raider from Los Angeles who didn't respect the city's heritage, using Amelia's art proposal as mere window dressing. The pressure was immense. The Harrison family, though impressed by Amelia's presentation, began to waver. They were a conservative private family, and the negative press was making them nervous. The deal was in jeopardy. Amelia knew she had to find a way to neutralize Mark, to expose him for what he was without stooping to his level. She spent sleepless nights thinking back over their 12 years together, sifting through memories looking for a key. Mark was meticulous, almost paranoid about his public image. He built his empire on a reputation of being a brilliant, unstoppable deal-maker. His brand was invincibility. If she could find a crack in that facade— The memory came to her in a flash at 3 a.m. It was from about 6 years ago. Mark had been in a fierce bidding war for a prime piece of beachfront property in Malibu. He had been up against a formidable competitor, an older, respected developer named David Smith. Mark had won seemingly out of nowhere. Smith's financing had mysteriously collapsed at the last minute. At the time, Mark had gloated, calling it a stroke of genius. He had told Amelia in a rare moment of unguarded arrogance, "You don't win by playing by the rules, Amy. You win by rewriting them." He mentioned something about an unfriendly partner in Smith's LLC, a man named Robert Prescott. It was a long shot, a half-remembered boast from years ago. But it was something. Amelia hired a private investigator using her own money, the first significant paycheck she had earned from the Vance Corporation. She didn't tell Julian. This was her fight. She gave the investigator the names David Smith, Robert Prescott, and the Malibu property deal. She asked him to look for any irregularities, any signs of collusion or foul play. While the investigator worked, Amelia doubled down on her efforts to win over the Harrisons. She arranged a private tour for the family at the L.A. County Museum of Art, where she had once volunteered. She walked them through the restoration labs, explaining the painstaking process of preserving art. She didn't talk about the Argent deal. She simply shared her passion, showing them that her commitment to preservation was genuine, not a corporate strategy. She was slowly, surely winning back their trust. A week later, the investigator called. He had found it. Robert Prescott. David Smith's partner had declared bankruptcy a year after the Malibu deal fell through. But the investigator had dug deeper. He had uncovered offshore bank records. 3 days after Smith's financing collapsed and Mark won the Malibu property, a shell corporation registered in the Cayman Islands had made a $2 million deposit into an account owned by Prescott's wife. The shell corporation was untraceable on its own, but its funding came from a series of smaller companies, all of which were secretly owned by Sterling Corporation. It was corporate sabotage. Bribery. Mark hadn't just outbid his competitor. He had paid his partner to pull the plug, bankrupting a good man in the process. It was illegal, unethical, and a direct contradiction of the pristine, maverick genius image he projected. Amelia held the dossier in her hands, her heart hammering. This was the weapon that could end it all. She could leak it to the press and destroy Mark's reputation overnight. It would be justice. It would be the revenge he so richly deserved. She sat with the files for a full day, wrestling with her conscience. Leaking it would make her just like him. It would create the public spectacle she had wanted to avoid. The story would become about their toxic divorce, not about his corruption. There had to be another way. A better way. She thought about his greatest weakness, his ego. The need to be seen as invincible. A public accusation would allow him to play the victim, to claim it was a smear campaign by a bitter ex. But a private one would be a direct threat to the foundation of his identity. She made a decision. It was risky, terrifying, and it would require her to face him alone. But it was the only way to win on her own terms. She picked up the phone and called Mark's private line. "We need to talk," she said when he answered. "My hotel suite. 1 hour. Come alone. And bring your checkbook." The suite at the Four Seasons in San Francisco was opulent, paid for by the Vance Corporation. It was a world Amelia now navigated with ease, but the irony was not lost on her. A year ago, she couldn't have afforded the coffee in the lobby. She stood by the floor-to-ceiling window looking out at the city lights. The dossier from the private investigator lay on the coffee table. She was terrified, but a cold, clear certainty ran through her veins. This was the final move in a game he had started. This was checkmate. Mark arrived exactly on time. He strode into the room without knocking his face a mask of arrogant curiosity. "A hotel suite. This is a bit dramatic even for you, Amelia. If you're here to beg me to back off the deal, you're wasting your breath." "I'm not here to beg," Amelia said, turning to face him. Her voice was steady, unnervingly calm. "I'm here to give you an education." "Sit down, Mark." He was taken aback by her tone. This was not the pleading, emotional woman he knew. He hesitated, then sat warily on the edge of an armchair, refusing to look comfortable. Amelia sat opposite him. She didn't speak. She simply pushed the dossier across the table towards him. He glanced at it, then at her, a sneer forming on his lips. "What's this, your diary?" "I'm not interested." "Open it," she said. With a long-suffering sigh, he flipped open the cover. His eyes scanned the first page, a summary of the investigator's findings. Then the second, which detailed the offshore money trail. She watched as the color drained from his face. The confident smirk vanished, replaced by a ghastly pallor. His eyes darted back and forth, reading, processing, realizing. He was trapped. "Where did you get this?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. Does it matter? Amelia replied. It's all there, Mark. The Shell Corporation, the payments to Prescott's wife, the exact dates and times, enough to launch a federal investigation, enough to send you to prison, enough to utterly destroy the Sterling Corporation and the invincible reputation you've spent your life building. He slammed the folder shut. You're bluffing. This is inadmissible. It's a fabrication. Is it? Amelia asked softly. Are you willing to bet your entire empire on that? Because I am. I can have this on the desk of every major news editor in the U.S. Attorney's Office by sunrise. Imagine the headlines. So much more interesting than stories about your bitter ex-wife. Don't you think? He stared at her, his mind racing, looking for an angle a way out. For the first time in his life, Mark Sterling was cornered, and the person who had cornered him was the woman he had dismissed as worthless. The humiliation was so profound it was almost a physical thing in the room. What do you want? He finally choked out. Money. Amelia let out a short, sharp laugh devoid of any humor. Money. Oh, Mark, you still don't get it, do you? You think everything can be bought. Everything and everyone has a price. She leaned forward. You are going to walk away from the Argent Hotel deal. You will withdraw your bid tomorrow morning, citing a strategic shift in corporate focus. You will make no mention of the Vance Corporation. You will issue a public apology to me and to Julian Vance for the slanderous articles your sources have been planting claiming you were given false information. His eyes blazed with impotent fury. You can't ask me to do that. It would be professional suicide. I'd be a laughingstock. You have two options, Amelia said, her voice like ice. Become a temporary laughingstock or a permanent federal inmate. The choice is yours. Oh, and there's one more thing. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small, worn object. She placed it on the table on top of the dossier. It was a faded, creased $10 bill. Mark stared at it, his breath catching in his throat. This was my severance package, Amelia said, her voice dropping to a near whisper, but each word was laced with steel. 12 years of my life you valued at $10. You didn't just divorce me, Mark. You tried to erase me. You wanted me to disappear broken and penniless. You wanted to prove I was nothing without you. She stood up and walked to the window, her back to him. Tomorrow morning, after you've withdrawn your bid and issued your apology, you will make a donation. You will donate $10 million to the San Francisco Art Institute's Scholarship Fund for Underprivileged Female Artists. It will be an anonymous donation, but it will be made in the name of the Rosewood Grant. You will send me the receipt. $10 million. That feels a little closer to fair compensation, don't you think? $1 million for every dollar you insulted me with. The silence in the room was absolute. Mark was breathing heavily, his world crumbling around him. He had been outplayed, outmaneuvered, and utterly defeated. You do this, he finally said, his voice ragged in this information. It disappears. You do this, Amelia corrected, turning to face him again. Her eyes shining with tears she refused to let fall. And you get to keep the sad, empty life you've built. The information stays with me as an insurance policy. If you ever come near me, my life, or my career again, it will see the light of day. Are we clear? He couldn't speak. He just gave a single jerky nod. He stood up, a broken man in a bespoke suit, and walked out of the room without the dossier, leaving his empire and his ego in tatters on her coffee table. After he was gone, Amelia finally sank into a chair, her body trembling with the adrenaline of the confrontation. She picked up the $10 bill. It no longer felt like an insult. It felt like a weapon, a key, a testament. A few minutes later, there was a soft knock on the connecting door to the adjoining suite. Julian entered, his face etched with concern. He had been there the whole time, waiting, respecting her wish to do this alone, but ready to intervene if needed. Is it done? He asked softly. It's done, she whispered. He crossed the room and pulled her into a gentle, strong embrace. It wasn't a hug of pity, but of profound respect and admiration. In his arms, Amelia finally let the tears fall. They weren't tears of sadness or anger anymore. They were tears of release. The ghost of Mark Sterling had finally been exorcised. The war was over. She had won. 1 year later, the San Francisco fog rolled back to reveal a perfect, crystalline evening. The Argent Hotel was no longer a derelict ghost, but a glittering beacon of restored Art Deco splendor. Its grand opening was the most anticipated event of the year, a confluence of old San Francisco society, new tech money, and the international art world. Inside, the lobby buzzed with conversation and the clinking of champagne glasses. Guests moved through the space with a sense of wonder, their eyes drawn to the art that adorned the walls. Each piece, from the soaring abstract sculpture in the atrium to the intimate black and white photographs of the city's past lining the hallways, told a piece of the Argent's story. It wasn't just a hotel. It was a living museum, a masterpiece of curation. And it was all Amelia's work. Amelia Rosewood stood near the grand staircase, a vision in a simple but elegant emerald green gown. She moved with a quiet confidence that turned heads more than any sequin or diamond could. She was no longer just an employee of the Vance Corporation. She was a junior partner and the president of the newly formed Vance Rosewood Arts and Culture Division, an entire branch of the company built around her unique vision. Julian Vance stood beside her, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. Their professional partnership had blossomed in its own time into a deep and profound love. It was a love built not on dependency or glamour, but on a foundation of mutual respect, shared passion, and the quiet understanding of two souls who had both known loss and had found their way back to the light. "You did this," Amelia Julian murmured, his voice filled with pride, as he watched her greet artists, donors, and critics with effortless grace. "This is all you." She smiled a genuine, radiant smile. "We did this." From across the room she spotted Mr. Harrison, the patriarch of the family who had sold them the hotel. He made his way through the crowd towards her. "Ms. Rosewood," he said, his old eyes twinkling. "I must confess I was nervous. But what you have done here, it is not a renovation. It is a resurrection. You have honored my family's legacy beyond our wildest dreams." Later in the evening, Julian tapped a glass for attention. He stood on the staircase, Amelia by his side, and addressed the crowd. "Welcome to the Argent," he began. "Many of you know the story of this building's journey, but the real story is one of vision. And that vision belongs to one person." He turned to Amelia, his love and admiration clear for all to see. Amelia saw the soul of this building when it was just a beautiful ruin. She has breathed life back into it with her talent, her passion, and her unwavering integrity. This hotel is her masterpiece. The room erupted in applause. As Amelia looked out at the sea of faces, she felt a profound sense of peace. Her journey had come full circle. She thought of the woman who had sat on a bus bench clutching a $10 bill as if it were the last piece of driftwood in a raging sea. That woman seemed like a stranger from another lifetime. She had faced her abuser and had not only survived, but had triumphed, not by destroying him, but by building something beautiful and lasting in his place. The Rosewood Grant was already funding the careers of a dozen young female artists, a quiet, anonymous legacy of her victory. Later, as she and Julian stood on a private balcony overlooking the glittering city, he took her hand. On her finger was a simple, elegant ring with a single clear diamond. It was an engagement ring, a promise of a shared future. "Are you happy, Amelia?" he asked. She looked at the city, at the magnificent hotel below, and then at the man she loved. "Happy doesn't even begin to cover it," she said. "I feel whole." She had learned the hardest lesson of all, that a person's worth is not determined by who they are with or what they have lost. It is not a number on a check or a bill crumpled in a fist. It is forged in the fires of adversity. It is built brick by brick with courage, integrity, and the refusal to ever let someone else write your final chapter. Mark Sterling had left his ex-wife with just $10, intending to make her a beggar. Instead, a millionaire had recognized her true value. But it wasn't Julian who had made her a queen. Amelia Rosewood had crowned herself with a throne built from the ashes of her past, and an empire woven from the threads of her own indomitable spirit. Amelia's story is a powerful reminder that our lowest moments do not have to define us. That $10 bill was meant to be an anchor, a symbol of worthlessness designed to drown her in despair. But instead, she transformed it into a cornerstone. She proves that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in resilience. It's about finding the strength within yourself to rebuild, to reclaim your narrative, and to turn an ending into a spectacular new beginning. Her journey from a humiliated ex-wife to the queen of her own empire wasn't about revenge. It was about redemption. It was about proving her worth not to her ex-husband but to herself. If Amelia's incredible story of triumph over betrayal moved you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who might need a little inspiration today. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell for more real-life stories of strength, survival, and the amazing power of the human spirit. What part of Amelia's journey resonated with you the most? Let us know in the comments below.